Hi. Welcome to the Q&A post our wonderful play that we've just heard. Firstly, I'd just like to start off by congratulating Mel. What a beautiful lyric and poetical piece, and it's actually left me feeling so uplifted. So thank you for that. I'm going to start by asking some questions around your process, Mel, and this extraordinary piece that you've written. With the 75th anniversary of Windrush, we've all been having conversations around underrepresented experiences of the Windrush generation. And I wanted to know a little bit about the process of creating a story told 3 times and still unfinished, and how it widened your understanding of that period and what you've learned.
Thank you. I think, thank you. Firstly, thank you so much, Pooja, for what you said. And it's wonderful to be here this evening and to see everyone who's logged in. So thank you so much. So yeah, the things that I've learned, 2 key things really. One of them is in relation to the archive material that I was able to look at, and that Iqbal and others at the National Archive has provided to me. I've always been told that I've always thought there was a very clear call for people from the Caribbean to come here. They needed us, we came, we worked, etc., etc. And what really surprised me was that I wasn't seeing that really clear call in the archive material that I was seeing. And I think at one point I sort of approached Iqbal. I was like, where is this clear call that I'm so familiar with, this narrative around, they called us, they needed us. And I was so surprised not to see that very clearly in the archives. I mean, history has certainly played out in terms of, what the Windrush generation has provided and the enormous contribution that they've made. But I just wasn't seeing that call, and it really surprised me not to see that. And instead, what I saw were a lot of records that were trying to differentiate different types of groups, a lot of records that were showing a bit of discomfort and uncomfortableness around the narrative here, and it just really surprised me. So that's something I learned. And I think, the other thing that I learned was from the workshops that we did, which were just amazing. But I'd never really thought about the impact of migration on the communities that you leave behind, on that grandfather, who, lost all of his family and may never have seen his family again. And I'd never looked at it from that perspective. And actually in the workshops, I really started to think in that space. And I just thought it must have been so tragic for that whole generation who lost a whole generation. And those two things really stuck out for me.
Well, it's very beautiful because that kind of segues into the format you chose for your story, because you've told a story within a story, giving these parallel perspectives around the understanding or the experience of people who came over during the Windrush, and then our perspectives today. And it opened up, listening to it and experiencing it, which I still feel so full and emotional about, where conversations lie and where perspectives lie, and actually that we must stand on the shoulder of the giants before us and know what that is. And I think you touched on that so beautifully. But I just wondered if you wanted to talk a bit more about the format you chose to tell this story, and the experience of that call to action not being so visible in the archive.
Yeah, and firstly, lovely to see Anastasia. So
Anastasia.
wonderful that you could join us. So Anastasia, director of the piece.
Apologies, I'm a bit late for this.
Welcome, Anastasia, and congratulations on a beautiful piece.
Thank you so much.
So yeah, just talking about the format. So I spent a long time I felt like this play and the commission was a huge responsibility. It was very personal to me. My grandparents and my mother and my father are from the Windrush generation. And I just thought, what am I going to do in this space? I spent a long time just thinking, I can't represent this. I can't, so much here. And for so many, it's still so raw. There's still so much happening. It's still so active. And I just felt like I couldn't do it justice. And I think the breakthrough for me came from just thinking, you need to explore what that is for you. You need to explore why this is so difficult for you. You need to, why don't you try and do that through just documenting how do you write a play in this space? So for me, that was a breakthrough. And then I was able to think about those conversations. And, you know, the second thing was, again, the workshops. So we got so much out of those spaces, and this theme of fracture, of families being torn apart as a consequence of migration. And actually, even me sort of identifying it in my own family, I'd never thought about it before, but you have children who were left behind. There's a wonderful documentary by Nadine White regarding the Barrel children, the left behind children, you know, and I was thinking, my gosh, this is even my family, like it's so universal. And actually the workshops, that theme kept coming through, and I thought, I've got to write about this too. How do I do that? And I thought, if I can try and mirror the experiences of Ernestine and what happened to her as a child with her own daughter, and what happens to her and her sister, then, you know, I could try and make that live. So yeah, that was the kind of thought process for me in terms of the format.
Yeah, and it resonated so deeply because we could hear our past and our present so beautifully, kind of both reflecting each other and challenging each other. So yeah, I think it was a beautiful format to choose, and thank you, because I think it opened up far many more questions. It's a river of conversation that it keeps kind of bringing back, and I think that's really important for the times that we're in. So part of the process has been working with Caribbean communities in both London and Bristol. So what was your biggest experience or takeaway from that?
I don't know if Anastasia, you want to start with the question?
Hi, yeah. So I think what me and Mel really realized was that it was really emotional. I think people really started telling their stories, and then we realized that there was really kind of a lot of I guess hurt and pain that came with migration and like separation of family. And I don't think we expected that. I guess we did. We kind of wanted to hear real stories, and kind of, and we were really familiar with the London is the place for me, that those kind of the songs and those images of like waving people were so happy to come to the UK, and wanting to create kind of a better life. And yeah, there were kind of like, the emotion was really interesting to see, but also the grit and the sort of perseverance actually of these people was also an amazing thing to discover and kind of see time and time again in every workshop in Bristol and in London. The sense that people had quite like a lot of challenges to sort of navigate, and then but then like actually kept persevering through those challenges and made a home here, in the UK, despite certain things that were happening. And we were quite open for whatever stories would come. But yeah, those are a few of the most striking things that we noticed when we started doing the workshops.
Yeah, wonderful. And within those workshops, did the hunger for that space feel really apparent as well, to have those conversations? How is that space opened up in terms of that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there was a hunger for the reality of stories to come out. I think a lot of people kind of starting to feel like Windrush is a buzzword, and it's become not really representative of everyone's sort of experience, and the kind of the collective term of it starting to feel a bit grating. So I think, yeah, people were kind of interested in giving their real stories, because it was like, actually we want to see better representation of us, is like in their voice. That's what kind of we were hearing quite a bit.
Wonderful, thank you. And I'm just going to segue into a question for Iqbal. So Iqbal, I just wanted to ask you a bit about the importance of the National Archives, and actually how creating and asking for responses to projects like this, what the impact is on our collective consciousness as a society, and why you think that's important.
I mean, I think what Mel and Anastasia have done is amazing. I mean, it's a really, really beautiful piece. I mean, we've had the pleasure of working with both of them before, and they've just taken it to the next level. I mean, it's a deeply moving piece, and very, very important because it picks up so many important themes. I mean, Mel has brilliantly, in such a short piece, drawn out some key themes that we are grappling with about were we invited, were we not? The whole issue about these very personal, intimate stories that have been covered up. What does an archive actually afford to people at the moment? Can it really give them access? It's referred, in our instance, the National Archives, but other archives around the country, and the struggles that still are there about how you make them more accessible, how you bring communities in. So I think in just this short piece, you know, the work that Mel and Anastasia and the team have done, and the high quality, the standard that Anastasia's achieved with the actors and actresses, and the sound, Louis' work, others, it's that kind of quality and giving it that kind of platform that I think is so vital in making dusty records hidden away come out in a way, because it whets our appetites, it gets people interested, and it's been such a important process that we've been involved in over a number of years with the audio plays, and Mel's been involved in now, this is her third for us, and it's just amazing to watch that development. So, and it does speak to the collective. I mean, the things that Mel and Anastasia and the team have brought out in this play are picking up on things that we've been researching over this year in terms of those disappointments that people feel, the feeling that they want to be recognized, that they need to have their own conversations, and that this moment of 48 is actually very important for us all. And that's what was so brilliant about Mel's invitation towards the end, that this is a conversation not just for the Black community, it's not just a conversation for immigrant communities, it's for everyone. And that 48 moment in many ways does mark an extraordinarily important transition in this country's own history. And so whilst in one level we're absolutely right to pick up the point that it's not just about 48 and onwards, but actually it does allow us a really important and incisive moment to say there's a new conversation that starts to happen in this country. And so I think for all those reasons and many, many more, what's been achieved by the team is just, you know, spellbinding.
Absolutely. Thank you, Iqbal. And yeah, the importance of, you know, the erasure of our stories, understanding that and reclaiming them. There are some questions in the chat, so I'm going to turn to some of the audience questions. This is from Rebecca. Going back to the call, was Glory's plans to move to Ghana related to the recent years of the call for those from the diaspora to return, or was there some other reason for Glory's plans?
Oh, it's a good question, Rebecca, and thank you for it. I think probably I had that in my mind. I mean, as I said, I just kind of wanted to mirror this idea of a fracture between siblings and what that does to a relationship. And I think there have been recent conversations around, you know, where, you know, can Black people live safely without the fear of racism now? And, you know, I've seen and, you know, had those conversations. So the answer is probably that was somewhere in the background. It wasn't sort of an active sort of thing that I was thinking about, but it was definitely, you know, part of my thinking in that space.
Thank you. This is from Rich Jones. I was very struck by Ernestine's reluctance to talk about her own family. To some extent, why English people can also be quite shy to talk about difficult family issues. Is there a particular Caribbean experience here?
So I would say definitely. I mean, Anastasia spoke about the emotion in those workshops. There are a few of them where we were all in tears because it reflected exactly that situation where you had, you know, I hope that some of the participants in that workshop will be listening. And I hope that, you know, we haven't focused on a particular story, but there is a theme coming through. And there were people in those workshops who had had that experience exactly like that, you know, and their relationships with their families had been fractured, and there were separations, in exactly the way that the play describes. So yes, absolutely is the answer.
And this is from Bridget Palmer. So amazing, thank you. I wanted to ask whether the theme of the story not being told, or only being partly told, or told late, was something you found in your research or workshops.
Yeah, I mean, Anastasia, I don't know if you want to speak a bit to that.
Yeah, absolutely. I just think that there are so many, a sense of like so many family secrets, and not deliberately, some of it not deliberately kept, but because of the trauma of certain things, or the desire to make a new life and therefore push certain things into the past, just meant that there were things that took a while to come out to people, that people are like in their adults before they hear certain things about their past or their parents, and an ongoing sort of discovery of who their parents are and what their parents went through, and also just discovering things about themselves, about why certain things were the way they were when they were younger. So those who were like in their 50s and 60s in the workshops, kind of talking about kind of when they were younger, what experiences they had. So yeah, it was interesting. I think when things are when migration is involved, sometimes there is like that separation of, this is who I was before when I was in this country, and this is how this is the life I want to make now, and therefore not so much of a focus on kind of things that maybe should be, or would, younger generations would want to hear or want to have been passed down to them. So we discovered that a lot.
Great. Thank you. I'm just trying to see if there are any more questions in the chat. If anyone has any more questions, please feel free to add them to the chat. And I just wanted to pick up a little bit on what you said, Anastasia, regarding what the process and this piece has brought in terms of conversations around migration in the UK, and possibly kind of working with your creative team, what those conversations brought to this story in the process too, and your actors.
So I think it was a case, I think we it was kind of a joy to bring to life this story, because it felt like it married the sort of, I guess, us as creatives, like in terms of the creative team kind of understanding what it means to make work, or to bring work to life, and the actual issues. And I think my conversations with the actors were about how close it was to certain, like some of our experiences, and understanding, being as creatives, trying to bring something that is close to you to life. And so like that felt like an experience that was close to us, and wanted to bring bring to life well, because of that, because of the kind of the importance of the story, that kind of it's hard to mine your personal story for art, and that's the journey of our main character. But also I think just being, I think sometimes there is the, tell us your story pressure, and actually there's a cost to it sometimes. So there's that. I think it felt like these voices were familiar, and so when we were talking to the actors, it didn't feel like it was a stretch to try and kind of bring them to life. I feel like there was more to your question that I haven't answered.
No, because I think the point that I'm drawing on from what the story created was these different prisms of the story that we all hold on to it in different ways, because we're all different parts of that history, yet we are the same reality. And I think the takeaway listening to it, and like Iqbal says, it's so emotive, it's so heartfelt around the conversations we want to have, being born in this generation or being born in the 1920s and going through that experience by the 1930s and 40s and being in this country. And so the creative team, the actors involved, kind of their responses to what it was unearthed, that catharsis, I guess. And I think the power of these stories that we are all inextricably linked, which is where, you know, like working with the communities in London and Bristol and the community groups around there, how their reflections responded and fed into the story, also in the National Archives. I mean, that's all the layers of the onion peel back. Those are all the questions that this piece of work that you've created has kind of brought to the fore, really. So it's hearing your process and experience of that's fascinating, really.
I think it was also interesting, like, to see, because when a piece is actually resonant, like you feel it, like the first read in the studio with the actors, like the actors were so moved, like one was in tears by it, because it was so close to home. She was like, this is like kind of reflecting my family, like with my parents, and like she was like, there's certain things that I still don't know, like about what happened, and certain family members that do not speak for some reason, and it's like, why do they not speak? And so I think it's like, it's very interesting when the piece of work actually moves the creatives were trying to bring it to life in the first instance, and then kind of trying to bring that sense of reality to it, so then others can experience it and then see themselves in it too. And like you say, there's so many people from different backgrounds that actually this story, relates to. Because being a migrant is not only ethnicity sort of bound, but also the history of like colonialism touches all of us as well. So yeah.
Absolutely. And these stories need to keep being told.
Yeah.
The other question is, any thoughts on making this a full-length in-person play?
Mel?
I run a Black theatre group and we would definitely watch. Well, it's definitely a conversation. Mel, that's a good question to ask, in terms of having kind of written this play, and also during the process of the play. I mean, you've worked with community groups, you've done workshops with the local communities in both London and Bristol, kind of and working with everything in the National Archives. That's a rich tapestry of responses, information, histories, shared knowledge and emotion. What are your thoughts about the next stage, and what did some of those experiences do to bring this play to life as well? Sorry, I've asked you two questions in that.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's interesting because also the play that I did with Anastasia with the National Archives, A Stranger in a Strange Place, we had a very similar question. People wanted to know what happens next. I think these projects are wonderful. I think it's such a great opportunity to engage with the archives, to try and bring out the narrative. I think in the play I sort of say actually it was really difficult to find ourselves in the archives, and that's the point, really, isn't it? That that you're not, I didn't find Auntie Dolores' story in the archives, and it's us bringing that to life. And it's wonderful to be able to use your imagination in that way and to try and do justice to what actually happened and existed. So I think it's there's a whole world out there, I think, to explore, and it would be wonderful to kind of do more projects like this. And part of this story is the fact that it's so huge, you can't tell it in 45 minutes. There's no way you could summarize the Windrush in 45 minutes, and that's partly the point of the play. So yeah, it'd be wonderful to do more work in this space and to be able to explore it more, and do plays where we can see as well as hear. But yeah, this though has been wonderful for what it is. It's been wonderful.
Wonderful, and they're definitely conversations to have. We've got to keep saturating our airwaves with these stories, as far as I'm concerned. There is one more question here that I'll read out. Brilliant play. How did you find the Caribbean families that ended up telling their stories? Was that a difficult process? And how long did it take you from initial play idea to the end result that we just heard?
Again, I don't know if Iqbal or Anastasia want to say anything here, but we work with some really great community groups, and I think the details are provided in some of the materials around this, who opened up their communities to us and welcomed us in, and you know, just engaged with us in such an amazing way. People brought things. Someone brought a BOAC like little badge and actually sung the kind of the little jingle or whatever that you hear in the play. Others brought, you know, a story that they'd written about their experience as a child or their accomplishments. You know, just a willingness to talk and be in the space was wonderful. And I think you know, they were such special places. You know, there was a lot of laughing, a lot of joking, a lot of remembering. People really wanted to remember collectively. And although every story was unique, as I say, there was a, oh yes, yes, I remember it. You know, it's just wonderful to sort of lap all of that up. So, you know, just the engagement, I guess Tamasha was, you know, instrumental in bringing those groups together and us operating in the ways that we did. And I guess the one thing I'd love to do is to be able to engage with those communities again and those individuals and, you know, get their reflections on the play as well, you know, because some of it is verbatim as well, so that they can identify, you know, what they have put in and the richness that they've provided in this space.
Yeah, wonderful. Absolutely. I think that's definitely a conversation to have and continue, Mel, how we, and Anastasia, how we connect those communities back to this piece as well. And Iqbal, there is a question regarding how to hear this audio. So shall I just pass over to you as we close up around how this audio can, the play can be heard after tonight's event?
I mean, we will, you know, put the recording and the Q&A onto our website, and it's really a question of just people keeping a watch out. But the plan is that we will do that, and I know that there is a questionnaire that's going to be sent out, and we've got some way in which we can maybe, those that are on this call, certainly to just keep them aware that, you know, look out for the future recording. So, and I think with Tamasha, we're also going to be discussing, you know, them also sharing that. So the plan is not to hide this play away in any way. This is vital, important work. So, you know, this is not to be hidden away. This certainly isn't.
Yeah. And I think the event like Bright link will still have it, won't it? And then look at, our Tamasha's website too. I want to say a huge thank you to everybody. Thank you to the National Archives. Iqbal, thank you for always bringing these extraordinary ideas and projects that we kind of have to respond to and, you know, engage brilliant artists to give us stories like this. So very much needed at a time when we need a lot of healing in the world and a lot of love and a lot of kindness. So thank you for making us remember that. And
I just want to say thank you to you, you know, Pooja and Tamasha, because it was a pleasure, like, to really work with you and the National Archives, Iqbal, and to just give us a chance as creatives to be able to engage with a story that feels really real and important. So facilitating and producing all of this has been like so great. Me and Mel had a really like interesting, powerful, like great time doing this.
Right, thank you, Anastasia, and more I say, let's keep the conversation going. Thank you so very much, and thank you to everybody who joined us tonight and have been part of this conversation and heard this wonderful play. I hope to see you all again soon. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Mel. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.